Hello and welcome to my video today. I'm going to be covering short and long-term storage for the Fisker Ocean. So if you're leaving your Ocean unattended for a period of time, I'm going to be showing several methods you can use to keep the batteries in good shape. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is vampire losses. I've covered this many times on previous videos, but they are very important in figuring out what to do when your car needs to be left alone. The vampire losses are when the 12-volt battery gets drained by the car waking up, running systems, and when it is doing that, it needs to charge up every so often. And on the Ocean, that could be every hour sometimes or every several hours. It really depends on the condition of the battery as well as the software and hardware in the vehicle. There may be some situations that cause high vampire losses that you probably should get the car looked at. If you have 1% or less vampire losses, that is great, and that makes things a little bit easier in figuring out what to do. If you have high vampire losses, say 2 or 3%, that greatly affects the high voltage battery over time when it's sitting by itself, not being plugged in. For example, if you leave the car alone for 2 weeks, not plugged in or anything, if you have low vampire losses, you may see anywhere from 10 to 15% or so losses in that time period. But if you have high vampire losses, you may see anywhere up to 40% or more. So a lot of it depends on the state of charge of the high voltage battery when you leave it parked. I recommend leaving it around 90% for that time period. If it's going to be a couple weeks or so, up to a month, 90% is fine, because then you may just have gradual losses due to the vampire inefficiency. However, if you need to leave it for more than a month, you may need to do some other things that I'm going to be suggesting in a minute. For a short period of time, under a month, you could use a battery tender. This 12-volt battery tender here is one I've used for over a year now, and it's very good. If you have this attached and plugged into a wall outlet, that will charge up the 12-volt battery. Now, there are some tenders that once that 12-volt battery is filled, it will not recharge that battery again unless it's unplugged and replugged in again. And that is an issue. If you have one of those tenders over a period for several weeks or a month, it's basically useless. So you need to make sure that your battery tender is capable of charging the battery continuously as needed without intervention. Another option is to have an EVSE or EV charger plugged in to that J1772 port. And for some EVSEs, the car, if it's sleeping, the EVSE will not charge up the high voltage battery. Sometimes you may need to unplug and replug in, kind of a similar issue to the battery monitor. If you do have an EVSE that can charge the car when it's sleeping, that's good. An alternate way of doing it is if during that time period of a couple weeks you want to charge up the battery, you could wake up the car by using the phone app, and then the car should start charging. There's other EVSEs that may just do that automatically and you don't need to mess with it. So those are two things that I suggest doing if you have the car for a couple weeks, up to a month or so. And if you have super low vampire losses, you may not need to do anything. Just charge the car up to 90% and leave it alone. Just lock it, nothing attached to it, and the losses are going to be minimal. Now, for over a month, or if you have extreme vampire losses, the third option I suggest is disconnecting the 12-volt battery and the high voltage battery first responder loop. And I've done videos on that. The first responders loop, there's one located under the hood near the battery, as well as the cargo area. I personally find the cargo area one easier to disconnect. So if you're leaving the car for over a month, charge it up to say 80, 90% if it's a month or two. Actually, for best conditioning of the battery, I would say 50% is optimal for most high voltage batteries for EVs for long-term storage. So if you can have it at 50% and disconnect everything, that high voltage battery is going to have very, very small losses over a couple months, to the point where I wouldn't even worry about it. And then when you come back to the vehicle, you would reattach the first responders loop and that negative lead on the 12-volt battery, and the car should be fine. There may be some situations if you don't have a strong or healthy 12-volt battery where you may need to charge that battery before it's connected to the Ocean again. So you may want to use a battery tender on that when it's disconnected. So there's a couple different variations for that long-term storage, but I think the best way for cost cutting, the reduction in charging of the vehicle over that time period, is just disconnecting it fully. And also for the safety of the vehicle and the 12-volt battery, just having it disconnected is probably the best thing. Of course, this is a very detailed subject and there may be changes. I may do an update video if I find out more information, but that should get you started. If you have a situation where you're parking the car for a week to a month versus long-term storage over a month, you may have slight differences in what you want to do with the battery pack. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.